Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Rob Phelan, also known as the FI Educator Online, and today we are having a conversation about investing, but more specifically, how do we invest our money in a way that supports what we actually care about? So what do we care about? What do we want in this world? And how do we use our money to support those goals and help create the world that we really want? This is a conversation that I am really, really excited to have. I met Janine, who's our guest speaker today, at a conference for financial content creators. And as soon as we started talking, I was like, this is a conversation that every person needs to have. How do you invest your money is a great one. We need to start there. That's the conversation for high school. But then it kind of turns into, well, what is my money supporting? When I invest my money, like what is that actually going towards? What is it supporting? And do I actually align with those things, or do I want to change how my money is being used? And that's what today's conversation is going to be about. So Janine Firpo is the co-founder of Invest for Better and the author of the book, Activate Your Money. And she's joining us today to talk to us about everything that comes with value-based investing. Janine, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really excited for this conversation and have this opportunity to talk to your students.
I know. And I'm like, I feel like I already know a lot of it because we had such a huge conversation about this and I left on fire to change how I invested. And I made a lot of changes as a result of that.
Wonderful.
So I hope you guys watching this, even if you haven't started investing yet, this is going to sit in your mind. You're gonna be like, okay, when it's time, when I'm ready, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to invest my money. And I'm not saying that everything we talk about today is going to be like the way to invest. It's more so, here's some things to think about. Have you considered this? And then once you have that thought process in place, you can start investing the way that you want to. So if you are joining us live, welcome. If you're on the replay, hopefully you have your discussion sheet that goes with this. There's lots of great stuff in here, and we're going to be referring to that throughout the conversation. Your first question is, what causes do you care or feel passionate about? And if you don't know yet, that's okay. We're going to answer that in a little bit. But if you're watching the replay, maybe pause, answer that question, and then we'll move on together. So Janine, I want to talk about this idea of value-based investing. What is that?
So, as you said earlier, every single dollar we have, even the money we have in the bank, is being used by someone for some end. And if we're not paying attention to what that end is, it may be funding things that we actually don't want to see in the world. So, values based investing or values aligned investing is a way of integrating your values and what matters to you into your investment decision making. It's just another piece of the puzzle as you're thinking about how you want to invest and what you want to invest in.
When I put my money in the bank, it literally just sits in a giant vault, right? Like, what do you mean it's getting used for something?
So no, in fact, when you put your money in the bank, what happens is the bank is taking that money and it's lending it out to other people for other purposes. And actually, they leverage your money up to 10 times. So every dollar that you have invested is worth up to 10 or more times that to the bank. So if you've got $1,000 in the bank, that's $10,000 of value to them. And a lot of large banks in particular are supporting the fossil fuel industry, private prisons, a lot of things that people may not agree with.
Yeah, so this was a huge eye opener for me, by the way, when I learned about how money is kind of created. So yeah, you put money into the bank, so you put $100 in, they can lend out $1,000 based on your 100. So like they're just creating this $900 out of thin air, and that's where a lot of our income or a lot of our cash in our society comes from, is just loans being made based on deposits. So that's a very interesting part of the banking system where money comes from. But yeah, the loans being made, who's getting the money? What's your money being used to support? It's a question I never really would have thought about. It would have been like, the bank's got it, it's sitting there somewhere, and I can get it back whenever I want. Not the case.
Yeah.
So then
Very
same thing when you
true.
invest, right? Like I mean, we're buying either stocks, bonds, we can invest in real estate. There's lots of things we can invest in, and just what is that money being used for when we invest? And you talked about like the things that we care about. Like, how does me buying a stock in Microsoft reflect in any way about what I care about?
Well, for you personally, you have to look at what Microsoft does and you have to decide, is this the kind of industry or business that I want to support with my money? You can look at the impact that that company is having on a lot of different factors. So, for example, one of the terms that's put out there a lot around this kind of investing is something called ESG. And
Mhm.
ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And what ESG actually is, it is a set of criteria and a ranking system to look at the risks and the long-term investment outcomes or the long-term growth outcomes for companies. So it's additional data that you can use to start to make decisions about your investments beyond just the financial implications. So what does that really mean? Well, the E, the environmental, stands for what is this company doing in terms of polluting our environment or just making our water unclean for us or adding carbon to the environment? How is this company showing up around that? There's a way to measure that. The S stands for things like what are they doing in terms of their workers' rights and paying fair wages? Are they contaminating our food? Are they considering their consumers and the livelihood and the best interests of the consumers in their business? And the G, the governance piece, stands for how do they manage themselves? Are they ethical? Are they transparent? Do they have good board policies? So all of these things can be looked at in terms of a particular company, and you can decide, does this company show up the way I want it to on those variety of factors or not?
Hmm. And like I've seen the ESG score when I've looked at like say Yahoo Finance, like you look up a stock or a particular ticker symbol, and for some of them, not all, but for a lot of them, like you can go to a tab at the end and it will show you their ESG score. So like, what does this score mean? And is like a low number better, a high number better? And who's creating the score, or where's the score coming from? You said it's measurable, but like who's doing the measuring?
That's a great question. And right now, I got to admit, it's a bit of a kerfuffle. So there are a number of different agencies that do ratings. There are three that are considered the best. One is called Sustainalytics, which is owned by Morningstar. Another one is called MSCI ESG Rating. And a third is FTSE rating. Now, the challenge with the ratings is there are literally hundreds of criteria that can be looked at to come up with an ESG score. And every one of these rating agencies has a different way of prioritizing those criteria, which means their scores don't match apples to apples. So there's a lot of
Kind of
work
sounds like a
being
credit
done.
score.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of, although those are more standardized, but these are not.
A little
And
bit.
so there's a lot of work being done and there's a lot of progress being made, particularly in Europe, to standardize these scores. So what you want to do is you don't want to look at the score from just one place as a result. You want to look at a couple of different places and see how they show up in different places. So you mentioned Yahoo. Morningstar also does this. A lot of the big brokerage houses will give ratings now, sustainability ratings. You can also use some other tools on the web. One of my favorites for companies is something called Ethos ESG, ETHOS ESG. You can go there. It's primarily a tool for financial professionals, but there's free data there as well. And you can look up companies and they'll give you really comprehensive information around how they think that company scores across a lot of different criteria. So it takes a little research. It definitely takes some thinking and doing, but it is achievable. The other thing I really want to get clear is, and I think this is particularly true for younger people, is we think we have to do absolutely the right thing. The solution has to be absolutely perfect, and it has to hit every single box we want it to hit. It has to be perfect around the environment. It has to be perfect around workers' rights. It has to be perfect around how it shows up for consumers. And the truth is, there is no perfect. The goal here is not perfect, it's better, it's progress. So you're going to have to make some choices. For example, if you really care about the environment and you really care about people getting paid a fair wage, and you're interested in a company and they're great on the environment and they're not so good on the workers' rights, then you have to decide which of those two factors is more important to you. And do you want to invest in that company based on your personal priorities or not? So there are choices that have to be made.
And that's hard. I mean, I know a lot of us, we're just getting started, and the idea of doing research is very intimidating. I even think like when I talk to high school students and even to my peers, like other adults, and I ask them like, well, what do you care about? What are you passionate about? Sometimes they struggle to answer that question. So like if we were going to do this, and like say like I kind of want it to be perfect. Like I want the companies I invest in to be good for everything. Like I don't want to compromise. Like how do I even start distilling down which companies I should be investing in?
Well, the place to start is your values. And on the student guide, on the second page, you've put something there called the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. And these are a set of 17 goals or objectives that were established by 193 countries in the United Nations in 2015. And these are objectives that governments, corporations, and individuals all over the world are striving to achieve by 2030. We're a far cry from getting there, but people are actually really working hard on these things. And they're really tangible. They're really straightforward. They're easy to understand, and they make a great starting place to consider what are your values and what do you want to prioritize. They include things like no poverty or gender equality or sustainable cities and consumable products and things related to the environment. And so when we teach our course at Invest for Better, we suggest that our participants pick 1 to 5 of these as the goals that they're going to set for their investing and for their philanthropy, and that really focus on those. And then that helps you establish your priorities, and that helps you start to think about, well, what are the things that I want to look at in the companies that I'm investing in? Because I can't look at all of those things for every company. It's just too much.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to ask you, like why 1 to 5? And I think short answer is you can't look at all of them. You would spend all day trying to find at least one company, and it's like trying to find the perfect person. Like I don't think it necessarily exists. Like you're going to try and
Doesn't.
have to compromise at some point, and really saying like, okay, what are my big ones? What are the things I'm really, really passionate about supporting? And just to pull those up again, like you have 17 choices. And that's a lot. And they're all like, you look at them like, oh, I don't really want to write any of these off. They're all really important in
Exactly.
their own way. But trying to decide, okay, well, what is most important to me, maybe right now, or what do I think is most important for the future of this world? And that can be a nice starting point for just you personally trying to figure out, like, what do you care about? What's important to you? What are your values?
Exactly.
And
Even picking just one is a great place to start. The other thing that I think is really important, so we're talking about investing in companies, and that is a choice. But there's also funds. So you can also
mm,
invest in stock funds instead of investing in companies. And interestingly enough, what I've found is that there tends to be a difference between the way men invest and the way women invest. Now, this is a gross generalization. It's not true in every case, but often you will find that men choose to invest in companies and women choose to invest in funds because it's just easier. It's a longer term play. And actually, because of that choice, women tend to outperform men when we invest because we invest with, we don't change our portfolios as often. We invest for the longer term and we often invest in funds. There are some great tools on the web to help you look at funds and determine what's in them and to find funds that match your values better. And one of my absolute favorites is a tool called Invest Your Values, which is put out by a nonprofit called As You Sow. And that is just a wonderful, wonderful tool. You can put any stock ticker in, and it will show you how that fund is showing up around 7 different criterias, like does it invest in fossil fuels? Does it treat women fairly? Is it invested in private prisons? Is it cutting down trees? So there are a variety of different things that you can look at, and you can use that tool to also find other funds that might be more aligned with what you want to see in the world.
and that's really helpful for us getting started. Because I mean, you're getting started with investing. One of the biggest hangups we're going to have is like, this just feels very overwhelming. It feels like a lot. And I want simple. I want like 1, 2, 3 steps that are going to get me to start it. And then maybe I can start learning more and doing more as I go. So being able to find funds that match your values is going to be a really important thing. And finding those funds. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first, let's do our trivia for today. So if you haven't been here before, we're going to do a trivia question. I'm going to flash up a question for you related to today's National Day, and you're going to give your best guess as to what you think the answer is without going over. So it's going to be a numeric answer. Try and guess without going over. If you're in a classroom, have a little bit of fun with it. See who gets closest to the answer, and we'll show you the answer at the very end. Let's see what today's trivia question is. Okay, so Global Pay It Forward Day. Like if we think about all the charitable giving that happens in the US over the course of a year, what percentage of it happens in December? So do you think it's like, well, it's 1/12 of the year, so it's 1/12, and what percentage roughly is that? Or do you think December is a little less charitable because there's a lot of consumerism happening? Or is it more charitable? Put your answer down on your sheet. There's a spot at the back where you can drop it in there. You're committing to your answer, and then you'll find out at the end how close you got. So Janine, I'm going to ask you your thoughts at the end as well.
Okay.
All right. So we talked about like finding the fund that's going to match our values. And I'm just going to pick like say two, and maybe you can give me an idea of like how this would work. So let's say gender equality. Like I want a fund that supports gender equality and climate is really important to me. How would you begin with that? So those are my two anchor points, and I want to invest in a way that supports those two values.
So I would really use as you sow. Okay. Both of those values are on that tool, or in that tool. And you can actually do something where you go into the fossil fuels area and you look for everything that gets an A there, and you can find those first, and then you can begin to look at how gender equity shows up against them too. There are also funds that are just there for gender equity. So if that's an interest of yours, so another way you can do this is you could say, all right, I've got a pool of money. These are my two goals. I can either look for a fund that does great with both of them, or I can pick one, I can split the money. I can put part of that money into a fund that focuses on the environment, and I can put part of that money into a fund that focuses on gender equity. And there are funds that do just that. For example, there's a fund, I think it's called WCEO, that just invests in companies that are run by female CEOs. So there are really interesting opportunities out there. One of the things that's really interesting to me about the stock market and the way I look at the stock market in my own portfolio is I have sort of a horizontal strategy and a vertical strategy. So what I mean by that is I look for broad-based funds that hold a large part of the market, primarily US. In this part of my strategy. I also have an international strategy, but US funds that hold a broad part of the market for something that's stable and that will not have a lot of fluctuation in the market.
So let's clarify some of those words. Broad-based, we're talking about like all the companies in the US, and we want as many of those companies in this fund as possible, because the wider the bigger your basket, the more of these companies that are in there, the more stable we should see that basket being, because now you have companies going up and down every single day, but if you've got a lot of them in there, it's going to stabilize you a little bit. Do you know roughly how many companies are public in the US that we could invest in? I'm going to say it's like what, thousands?
There are definitely thousands, because I know that one fund that I'm aware of has like close to 3,000 just in that fund, and it is only larger businesses and middle-sized businesses. It doesn't even go all the way down into the small businesses. So I don't know, somewhere in my mind, I'm thinking 7,000, but that could be completely wrong.
I was going to guess 6. So I think that's, somewhere in the like closer to 10 than it is to 1.
Yeah. So I'm glad you, and the other thing about part of the reason why owning that whole bucket of companies is because you're really diversified across a lot of different companies. So rather than just holding one, If something goes wrong with that one company, you have a big impact on your total holdings or the total value of your portfolio. But if you're holding 2,500 companies because you're in a fund, if one company really has a problem, then a lot of the other companies aren't going to have a problem, and you're not going to see as big a dip across your portfolio as you would with just the one. So I have that, and thank you for clarifying what I meant by
Mhm.
broad-based. That's great. And then in addition to that, that's where I would put the majority of my money. And then in addition to that, I would have ETFs, which are exchange traded funds. They're a special kind of fund in the stock market. And I would put smaller pieces of money into some of those because they're very specific and targeted. So, for example, you can buy ETFs that are focused on, like I said, gender. You can buy them that are focused on racial equity. You can buy them focused on affordable housing or solar energy or clean water. So there are so many ETFs that are very, very specific in the industry that they're invested in and the sector that they're invested in. You can get very deep impact, but because they're so narrow, they're going to have more volatility because they're not diversified as much as some of the other funds are. So I
Okay.
do both.
So you got the broad one to kind of provide stability, and then you're going a little bit more narrow on some of these very specific funds that are going to support a smaller percentage of the companies in the US because they fit whatever the criteria is that you're looking for. Okay, so
Exactly.
that's going to be a little riskier. It'd be the equivalent of us having like a total US stock market index fund and then buying some individual companies as well and saying, okay, like I really want these companies, but it's much more risky to have that. So I'm going to do that with a little bit of my money. Is that kind of what you're doing as well? Like a smaller amount of your
Exactly.
money going into those things?
Into those funds, and they have a potentially greater upside. So yes, the risk is bet is higher. The potential of downside is higher, but so is the potential of a better upside. So I gamble a little with some of my money, right? It's a little bit more of a
It's a
gamble.
calculated gamble. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Going all in on one stock is probably as high risk as you can get. So being like, I'm going to put all my money on Microsoft or Tesla or Google or this next up and coming company
Right.
because I think it's going to the moon. Very high risk, could be high reward. So like when you do one company, it could go up by a much bigger percentage than the entire market would. It can also fall a lot harder than the market would. So the more companies you add in, the less risk you are potentially
Exactly.
taking. Now, if I were on the receiving end of this talk, I would love to see a little bit more about the as you sow and like what we're talking about and what we mean by these gradings. So I want to pull that up for you all just so we can take a look at maybe one or two funds together. All right. So the one that I invested in first when I started doing any sort of like sustainable investing was this one called Vanguard's ESG Fund.
Yeah.
And this was what I was told, like back when I was beginner investor, Rob. If you want to eliminate some of the things from your portfolio, like fossil fuels, I think maybe guns are not in here as well, or weapons, that this is a fund that would take out some of those kind of more controversial things and would leave the rest. So if we're looking at this, can you see this screen, Janine?
Yes, I can, and I'm invested in this too.
Okay,
ESGV.
can you walk me through what we're seeing?
So sure. So you're seeing the top of this information, and what you're seeing is a grade. So first of all, the B. What As You Sow does is it gives a grade of A, B, C, D, or F to different funds based on how they're showing up around a particular criteria. So this one gets a B. That's
Okay.
really important, going back to we're not looking for perfect, we're looking for better, right? Doesn't
Yes.
get an A, it gets a B. It also shows you how much of the total amount of money in this fund is invested in fossil fuels. And you'll see there's a little sliver of black on the top of that
It's a
gray
little
circle,
thin. Yep.
right? So it's very small amount. It's some. It will show you on the right, you're seeing on the right side is what it's actually invested in terms of the fossil fuel industry. It's invested in coal, and it shows you that it has one holding in coal. You could click on that and it would tell you actually the company that you're invested in there. And by the same token, it shows that you're invested in 3 companies in the oil and gas industry, one in the fossil fuel fired utilities. So you can see, and if it held hundreds of companies, it would show you the hundreds of companies. So if you continue to scroll down on this window, keep scrolling, keep going, keep going, keep going. Here it shows you how this fund shows up against all these other criteria. So it does get an A in firearms, but it gets a lot of Bs and a couple of Cs. Again, not perfect, but way better than a lot of other things that are out there. Way, way, way better. And what I can say about this fund is I own this and I own another fund that I've had for decades that some people consider one of the best things to invest in if you just want broad market, low fee investment. It gets D's and F's almost across the board.
Okay.
This does way better, right? And for the most part, over the last 6 years since ESGV has been in the market, it has been outperforming my other fund. There was only 1 year where it did slightly less. It did a little worse 1 year, but over 6 years and in the long run, overall, it's outperformed. Now, right now, ESG funds are having a little bit of a challenge because of the current market conditions, particularly with the tariffs and the other things that are going on. It's really hurting the tech industry. Also, a lot of these funds hold Tesla because Tesla has been such a powerful player in the environment, but Tesla has tanked more recently, in large part because of Elon Musk. In fact, I just heard yesterday the board decided they're going to remove him and they're going to put a new CEO in place at Tesla. So right now, because of the way they're structured, some of the ESG funds are taking a bit of a hit. However, research has shown that over the long term, research that goes back 20 years shows that over the long term, they have done as well, many of them, or better than more traditional funds. And I strongly believe that going forward, they'll continue to do well. It's really important when you think about an investment and you look at returns that you're not just looking at the return right now. You want to think about these investments over a long term. That's the goal. They're going to go up and down on a given day, a given week, a given year. But the objective is, and historically, the stock market has done well over the long term. And so that's really what you want to look at when you're looking at stock returns, is like how'd they do over 5 years, 10 years or longer.
Because it's funny, like this is almost a redo of a earlier conversation Janine and I were supposed to have back in January. And when we looked in January, we're like, yeah, the ESG fund over the past year has outperformed the S&P 500, so the 500 largest companies in the US, which is a good benchmark for kind of being like, okay, how is it doing compared to the entire US market? But that does change, and current administrations can change that, policies, what's going on in the world. And I thought your example of Tesla, I know we're kind of dating ourselves a little bit, like we're in May right now, but Tesla is a good example of what happens or what could happen when you invest in an individual company. So like you go back a year from today and Tesla was the company to own. Like they were doing great. They were soaring. Things were awesome. And then some negative news happens and people start developing a mindset, a belief about Tesla, and it can drop. And that's the hard/fun part of the stock market, the unpredictable part. It's not just about the company itself and how well they're run or their numbers. A lot of the stock price is the feeling about a company and the beliefs about them and what the public think. And that's what determines price. It's who's buying, who's selling. If more people are selling, the price goes down. If more people are buying, the price goes up. So just be wary of that. Individual companies can have a risk, even if they seem like they're great today.
Exactly. And that's why this ESG criteria is so important, because it measures things like that. Is how is the public going to feel, and what are the things that the company are doing, and what could potentially cause a backlash against them. So those are things we want to be thinking about and incorporating into our thinking. The other thing I want to mention, because you've talked about the S&P 500 a couple times, and I know that a lot of people really hold that up as the holy grail to measure against. But we shouldn't be measuring everything against the S&P 500, because the S&P 500 is an index that tells us how are the top 500 companies in the country doing, right? If you want to hold something up to that, you should be holding up funds that are also trying to match that, that are also holding like the top 500 companies. But if you look at something like ESGV, which we just talked about, ESGV has somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 companies in it. So the S&P 500 is no longer the best benchmark to measure. A better benchmark is something like the Russell 1000 or the Russell 2000, because the Russell 1000 holds the 1,000 top companies and the Russell 2000 holds the top 2,000 companies. And so you want to make sure when you're looking at a particular fund that you're measuring it against a benchmark or an index that's actually aligned with it and not really different than it, or you're not really comparing apples to apples.
That's the thing, apples to apples for sure. And speaking of, like, let's just take a quick look at what the total US stock market fund looks like on As You Sow, just to see like how it compares. So this is the ticker VTI. So it's another Vanguard fund. So remember, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, these are the companies that are creating these funds. They're the ones deciding what goes into the fund. So this is not just the total US stock market. This is what Vanguard's fund looks like. It's supposed to match what the entire US stock market looks like. So we get a D here. So the US stock market in general, overall, gets a D. So what's different?
So what's different here is you'll see that a lot more of the total holdings are invested in fossil fuels. Where before we just had a little sliver, here we have a much bigger black area. You'll also see, if you scroll down, that there are 40 companies in the top owners of carbon reserves. There are 28 companies in the coal industry, 158 in the oil and gas. So a lot more companies are held in this fund that are actually probably polluters of our environment. So that's why it's getting a D. And if you scroll down, you'll see how it shows up against all of these other criteria. Not so good. And you can click on any of those and it will go into an explanation of why it's it'll show you why it's showing up the way it's showing up in terms of that particular criteria.
Sure. Let's look at deforestation, see what happens. So we're looking at deforestation. What do we got here? So companies that are contributing to this?
Yes. So they are, so like in the agribusiness, one of the areas that creates a lot of deforestation is going after palm oil. And so these companies are involved in palm oil, which means they're probably cutting down trees in third world countries around the world or developing countries around the world. And you can see that, again, that a significant 13.09% of the total holdings are invested in these kinds of industries, either agribusiness that's doing deforestation or banks that are offering money and loans to these kinds of industries to cut down forests for a variety of different reasons.
And this is what we talked about. This is that direct versus indirect. So like, you wouldn't have thought, oh, banks are contributing to deforestation. No, they're in the finance industry, but they are in a different way. And then even below that, again, the major consumer brands that are using products or are in some way contributing to this. That's something that we can also think about, particularly when we talk about equal pay, fair trade, gender equality. Like, what are the companies that are maybe directly and indirectly influencing those core values that maybe are important to you? And then are you supporting those with your investing or not? So super interesting. Okay. That's a lot. It is a lot. And it's something I hope that as you are watching this, you're not just kind of getting overwhelmed and like, I can't think about that, put it away to the side. Let it sit with you. You think about like, okay, like when I start investing, like what is important to me? So let's start with that. So after we figure out what's important to us, then you would go, choose some funds that you would maybe add to your broad-based fund. So if you're doing a total stock market index fund, which is a very solid piece of advice for the majority of your holdings, but if you're going to get a little bit more specific and start investing in your values, maybe find some of these smaller funds to add in. How do we do this without like having to like manually go in and add money every single month and research the funds? Like, what's a way to make this as streamlined and easy as possible for ourselves?
In terms of well, I think what a lot of people do is you would pick things that you want to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're doing something where you're putting in money every month, which I think is really smart, um, then just put it in the same fund. You don't have to find different things every single time you invest. You can actually put money in the same thing again and again and again. And then when you build that one up a little bit, then you can buy the second thing. This is not as great a strategy when you're doing just individual stocks. You've got to have more diversification when you do individual stocks. You probably want somewhere like 30 to 50 individual stocks if you're really building an individual stock portfolio that's going to have not a ton of volatility and you'll be safe with. But if you're doing funds, you can put a lot of money into the same fund over and over. And then once you've gotten to a point where you feel, okay, I'm good with that. I kind of understand that fund. I kind of have been watching it for a while. Then go find another one and invest in a second one and then watch them together. See how
Mm-hmm.
they do. I mean, one of the things that I did in the way that I really sold myself on this kind of investing is I did the research. I found ESGV and some other things. I invested a little bit in them. And then I watched them and I watched how they compared to the non ESG funds that I had. And over time, I was like, hmm, this is pretty interesting.
They're
I,
matching, if not doing better. Yeah, let's
I
go.
think I'm going to start selling off that non ESG stuff and start buying more of the ESG. So, I think what's really important to understand is investing is a lifelong endeavor. It's a marathon, it is not a sprint. You are going to get better at it over time. You're going to get smarter at it over time. Keep doing it, keep paying attention to it, keep investing, and you will be happy in the long term. And I want to particularly say this to women, to the girls in the room, because we have traditionally been left out of the financial industry. In fact, when I was your age, it was not possible for me to get a loan without a man signing for it. So only 50 years ago was that true. We have been left out for a long time. We've been told for a long time that we're not good at this. We think that it's really hard. It's not. This is not hard math, even. This is just simple math. We
Mm-hmm.
can do this. We're really good at it. We outperform men when we invest. That has been shown through a lot of research. And it can actually be really fun. It also is great to be able to control your own destiny. So, women are great at this, and we are going through one of the greatest wealth transfers this country has ever seen right now. Um, by 2030, just 5 years from now, women are going to control almost half of the money in this country. And so we have an opportunity to really think about what we want when we invest, because up to this point, it's all been the guys that have been figuring it out. So it's time to equal that playing field a little bit and have us all involved. And I think we're going to have a better outcome as a result.
And I love that you said that and you brought that up because that is so true that women have been, pushed to the background in a lot of financial decision making and ownership and wealth management. And that would probably go in an age sense as well. Like we kind of, I think, would have been brought up that investing is for older people and not for younger. It is a younger person's thing too. And in fact, you will come out way more ahead if you start younger. I think any of our minorities can also say, like, you know what, we should be also investing and getting involved in this. So please know this is for everyone. This is not just
Oh,
something
yeah.
reserved for the ultra wealthy. It's not reserved for those of you who are going on to do a college education. Like anybody can invest and should invest. And that's
Should.
the big message that we've got here.
Should. In fact, I want to just give a data point to that because I think it's really
Mhm.
important. So, because of compound interest, which means when you put something in a bank or you invest something and you make a little bit of money, like let's say you have $100 and you make 10, now you've got 110. So now the next time you get interest, you're getting interest on 110. not 100. So that adds up and that adds up and that adds up. And over time, it has a huge cumulative effect. So if you are 20 years old and you start investing $100 a month at 20, and you do that for 10 years and stop, you will have more money by the time you're 60 than somebody who starts investing $100 a month at the age of 30 and does that for 30 years because of this cumulative effect. Time is your friend. You're super young. Time is really your friend. You're going to live longer than your parents do by a long shot. And so you have so much time on your side in terms of this. This is how people get rich. They grow their wealth, they invest. So start now and keep going.
I hope you haven't just blown your one piece of financial advice for the future. So I got to ask you that one again later. Okay. So you know what it is now. You know what it is. It's to start young, it's to get going. I wanted to come back though to the just the getting started part and choosing your investments. This is where I think it's so important as well. And I hope you are doing this in your classroom, is to do an investor policy. So what do you want to invest in? How much do you want to invest each week, each month, each year? What percentage of your money do you want going into different things? And if you can get that down on paper or in some sort of system, then that just becomes your guidebook. Yeah. I remember when I started investing, I was in individual stocks because I just didn't know any better. And every time I would have money to invest, I was trying to pick which stock to buy because I couldn't buy just $1 worth of each one. I had to buy whole stocks. It was very messy. Now it's so much easier that money comes in. So say $10 and I can be I want $1 in each of these different things. I can split my money up by dollars, which is wonderful. There's some really great brokerage accounts out there that will let you do it by percentage. Or if you're in a retirement account with a company in the future, you might be able to just say I want 25% of my money going into this fund. I want 50 going into this fund. So my teacher retirement account lets me do that. I can say I want 70% going into a US stock market index fund, 20% going into an ESGV, and then 10% into bonds. I hope my percentages just add up to 100, but make sure you have your system. And I think that reduces a lot of the thought and the stress that comes with trying to figure out what to invest in. And just make your plan and then execute your plan. And maybe once a year, revisit your plan and be is this still the plan for me or not?
Exactly. Exactly. And I would also suggest to read, get newsletters, listen, follow thought partners, thought leaders in this space.
That's what the point of this is. You're supposed to find people to follow on social media, fill your feeds with people who've got really great stuff. We're going to talk about your social handles in a little bit. But yeah, this guest speaker series has lots of great thought leaders that you can follow if social media is where you like to learn and consume.
Right.
There's podcasts, there's YouTube channels, there's books,
there's all kinds of stuff.
There's media everywhere.
One of the things that I love is I put alerts in Google. So you can do Google alerts, and every day I get an email with all the news related to my Google words that I put in. So I look for things like women investing and entrepreneurship and ESG and values aligned investing and things like that. And I get daily emails on all of those things. So it's a really great way to tap in also to the people, the articles, the sources that might be of interest to you.
I love that. All right, let's talk about some student questions. We didn't get a ton this time, and I think it's because we've done a really great job of answering all these questions. But if you're watching the replay, you have a question that we didn't answer, put it in the comment section of the YouTube video that you're watching on, and Janine or I will get in there and try and answer that for you. Okay, so we answered a couple of these already. So Lauren asked about the returns. We've already said ESG funds will either match, outperform, or lag a general market. It will change by year, but as we zoom out and we look at the big term picture, ESG seems to be doing pretty good. They seem to be matching or outperforming the general market. So you're not losing money by choosing to invest in your values, hopefully.
Yeah, and realize there are many, many, many ESG funds, just like there are many, many, many non-ESG funds. So in general, that is true, but you still have to look at each particular fund that you're interested in and look at its performance before you make the investment decisions. So make sure you're looking at the values and the performance as well.
David asked the question about finding companies that align with my values. So do I need to spend a lot of time researching? I think we've answered that. No, you don't. Like, there are some great websites. Janine gave us an awesome one that we looked at together. So it was asyousow.org and then /investor values. I will have that linked in the description of this video too. So you can quickly just click on that, go explore it, see what you can find. Maybe check out some of your favorite companies, check out some of your favorite funds and see how they do. Explore a little bit. All right. And the last question we got was from Patrick. So are there funds that I can invest in? There sure are. You don't have to do individual companies. Somebody's already done the research for you, found these companies, put them into baskets together and said, hey, you can buy a slice of this basket that has all the companies that you want to invest in. You just got to find the fund that's right for you. And again, that As You Sow website is going to be a great place to go for that.
And actually, a great way to find companies would be to go find an ESG fund that you really love, and then look up on Morningstar or Yahoo or one of the other tools, what are their holdings?
Yeah, which
What
companies
do
are
they
in
got
there?
in the fund? What companies are in there? And then you can make choices based on that too. So that'll help you narrow the field really easily.
That's great advice. All right, before we wrap up today, let's find out the answer to our trivia question. You got your answer ready, Janine? Okay, let's see. 30%. So almost a third of the charitable giving that happens in the US happens in the month of December. What did you put down?
I put down 75, believe it or not.
Wow.
I
You
thought
went
it was
way
going
high.
to be much bigger. And I thought it was going to be much bigger because part of the reason people do their giving none, and there's like Giving Tuesday and all this stuff to push you at the end, is for taxes.
Yep.
So you have to make whatever your financial contributions are, your philanthropic contributions, before the end of the tax year if you want to write it off the following year. So a lot of people wait a long time. And I'm really glad to see it's only a third, because that helps the nonprofits manage their businesses better, to not be
Yeah. So a
waiting
lot of
for
people
all
are
that
choosing
in a
to
year.
spread it out over the year. And then there's a whole bunch of us that are, in December, Giving Tuesday, we're feeling more charitable. We do supply money to different charities, or for tax purposes, we try and balance our books in some way. But yeah, 30%. So hopefully you all are comparing now in your classes, like who got the closest. Hopefully you have a fun prize or celebration to happen for that. Before we wrap up today, so Janine, you said your number one piece of advice was what? Get investing early?
Get started as soon as you can and keep going. Just keep going. And no amount is too small. It's what you said, Rob. Now it is true. No amount is too small. Just do it.
Just start.
Do it.
You can do $10 a week. I think my son is 5 and I'm probably doing like $10 a year for him right now, because he's investing himself and he's putting in like $1 here or there. So it's not nothing. It's going to end up being something when he's older. And even just that habit of starting to put money away and invest, even when you have other things that you are trying to fund right now. Like, I know you're in high school, you probably have cars, maybe future housing, maybe college, you have other priorities that you're trying to fund right now. But even just carving off that little slice and saying, this is for future me, is going to make a huge difference later on. And try and build that habit, of doing that. And then when you get your big kid job, when you start getting raises, you can start slicing off more of it and say, okay, this is for that investing, the future me that's going to be very wealthy or comfortable or safe or relaxed or not stressed, whatever that word is that rich means to you. That's what we want. We want choice. We want freedom. So that's what you're investing for. All right, Janine, before we wrap up, where can we find you if we want to learn more from you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of social, but I am on LinkedIn, and I speak there often. You can also go to investforbetter.org and sign up for our newsletter if you want to follow us. You can do that there. You can also follow Invest for Better on Instagram. I believe we're on Instagram and also on LinkedIn.
And I forgot to put that one in. So that's Invest for Better with the @ symbol in front of it. There you go. So that will be your Instagram handle. Yes. So wherever you guys want to consume, go find people like Janine. If it's not Janine, find others who have been on these speaker series before who are putting out wonderful content about personal finance, investing, credit, debt, whatever it is, and just have those cycling through your newsfeed so you continue to learn as you move forward beyond the classroom, hopefully as well. All right, Janine, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
For those of you watching your classrooms, we got more guest speakers coming, so make sure you watch out for those. We have Chloe Daniels joining us next week to talk about just getting started with investing and her personal journey of like going through debt and then turning it into wealth in the future. We have a really cool one coming up with Hannah Williams from Salary Transparent Street, who's going to talk about salary transparency and how you really get what you're worth when you apply for that first job. So watch out for those. They're coming down the pipeline. All right, Janine, thank you so much. We'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, bye.